Hello, I am Brenda Howard, and I am currently a first grade teacher at Kingsland Elementary School. I taught my first year 11, 12 years ago for a private school. The next year, certified teacher. I was a substitute in a pre-K para before getting hired on to teach for Georgia Cyber Academy, teaching third grade general education math. And the next year, I started teaching third grade language arts. The last year I was there, they had me teaching language arts and social studies, all general education. Then, after about 3 years of that, I was hired on at Kingsland Elementary School, teaching special education, upper grades for the first couple of years. And then the next 4 years, I taught the lower grades, kindergarten through third grade, actually. And the last 2 years of that was there, the year of the shutdown, and the next year where we were doing virtual. And I was actually traveling and serving two schools. When we went virtual, I was the virtual special education teacher for both schools. So eventually, essentially, I was serving all grade levels, kindergarten through fifth grade, which was interesting and fun. So I feel like I do have quite a unique background and a lot of experience with differentiation that I can share with you. And so I'm excited to present to you today. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're just going to start with a case study, just a little bit of it. I'm not going to show you the whole thing. It's a little bit long, but I'm just going to share with you the nuts and bolts of Mr. Franklin's classroom. So Mr. Franklin teaches world geography class. So obviously a high school level class. And he was working with his class on doing a comparative study of the different cultures. And one of the things that he shared with his students was some commonalities amongst all of the cultures. And one of those being buildings. The differences amongst the different cultures were obviously like the purposes, size, style, materials used, that type of thing. So moving along with what Mr. Franklin did with his class, he has already been working with his students throughout the school year on studying and exploring buildings. So his students could apply about 3 principles or generalizations, and they could develop research skills. This was a heterogeneous classroom, meaning that it was a very mixed and diverse class, and it required a differentiated approach to this unit of study. So Mr. Franklin had students with lots of different learning styles, cultures, and strengths, and he often gave students feedback on a regular basis, and he let them know why he was using the different types of procedures that he was doing. He began the unit with working doing whole class instruction, giving them the basics of what they needed to know and understand about the situation, the setup for this unit. And then he made teacher assigned groups where these were based off of their readiness to learn, comprehension based assignments. The students working in these assignments, they had several questions they had to ask, some different categories they had to think about as they were working. And then once they were done with that portion of the assignment, he allowed the students to work on their own types of grouping. So at this point, students were able to then decide which group they wanted to be on based off of their interest, if they were interested in this culture or that culture. So there were a great number of ways that he allowed the students to work, and he used different strategies for differentiation. In the end, he concluded the lesson with a discussion and some presentations from the students. This unit took him about 3 weeks. And in a little bit, I'm going to come back to Mr. Franklin's case study. and share with you a mind map of how he showed differentiation in his classroom. But first, let's move on to the next portion of this, which is where I did some research and looking up some information from EduGAINS, this website. They define differentiation as differentiated instruction is a cyclical process that involves moving from finding out about, knowing our students' readiness, interests, their learning preferences, to responding to what we find out by adjusting the content, process, product, or learning environment accordingly. Basically, what they're talking about, if you look at the bottom of this screen, you can see the cycle, the way it works out. Getting to know your learner is talking about learning their readiness for learning, their preferred interests, their preferred learning style. Once you know about your student, then you can determine how you're going to deliver the instruction. What types of differentiation you're going to need, whether it's with the content or the process, product, or the learning environment. Then you'll instruct, they'll do their stuff, and then they'll have an assessment, which will also be based off of differentiated instruction practices. And then you'll know more about your student. What did they know? What did they get? And then the cycle starts all over again, getting to know them, responding with differentiation, assessing for learning. I think that's pretty great that I like that visual for me, because I had not really thought of it as a cycle per se. So thinking about those three areas of knowing your student, readiness is where you're looking at the student's prior learning and what they're going to bring to a new concept, such as what type of prior knowledge do they already have about this topic? What kind of experience do they already have that might relate? And what are their current skill levels? And then what learning skills and work habits have they been developing? Are they a student that needs a lot of redirection, or are they somebody that gets their job done so that they can move on to the next thing? And the next part of that is getting to know your student's interest. When talking about student interest, it could be their predispositions, passions, curiosities about any kind of topic or skill. It could be in the area of academics, career, personal, recreational, social. As a first grade teacher, I can tell you personally that I don't have to ask my students very much because they can tell me everything. But there are some things that maybe they don't tell me that I don't know. Like maybe they're interested in a topic they'd like to read more about. And for my level students, that's, one of the biggest things that I push is read and take AR quizzes just to build up that fluency and comprehension at their level. So if they're kind of reluctant to read, if I knew what they were interested in, I could maybe suggest the books that are on a topic that they're interested in. The next area is their learning preferences. So this is just learning styles, and we've all heard about learning styles before. This is how we prefer to learn, or how we learn the best. It's how we process things and how we remember new information. Maybe the student's a visual learner or auditory. Maybe they're kinesthetic, or they could be a combination of all of those things. There's another list out there with a much longer list of learning styles, like, are they more musical, mathematical? Do they like to write? Do they like to perform? These are all different things to think about when you're thinking about your students' learning styles and learning preferences. Some key features to remember when thinking about differentiated instruction are keeping your groups flexible. Have flexible learning groups. Yes, you're going to have those times where you need to have your students grouped out by high, middle, low. But sometimes you just need groups that can work well together. Other times you want to have some mixed groups of different learning styles and academic abilities. So make sure your groups are flexible. And please, 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 when you form your groups, if you do have high, middle, low, don't call them that. I would avoid numbers, and I would avoid red, yellow, green. Anything that can make the students realize that, oh, that's the slow group and that's the not group, because that's, not going to help them feel confident in their learning. One suggestion is that when you have groups that are semi-permanent, that you work with on a continuing basis, is to let the students decide to name their own groups. When you do the more flexible groups, for example, when you're doing an activity where you really want to have a mixed abilities or mixed learning styles together for collaboration on a project, they can name their groups too. And that gives them a little bit of what we call student choice, which is the next item to keep in mind. I know that there's sometimes you just can't give a student a choice. They have to do this work. They have to do this assessment. That's just part of, learning. But you can give them choice and ownership in a lot of things. For example, you could give a choice board of how they could present a project. They could present it in a video. Maybe they want to handwrite it. Maybe they want to make a craft. If it's something that makes it exciting and engaging for them, they're still learning that topic or that skill, but at the same time, they're presenting in a way that's meaningful for them and making it more authentic. Make sure also that your tasks are respectful, to make sure that it's equally engaging for all students. You're promoting those high expectations and optimal achievement, and that you're also assessing using the same assessment criteria. Just because Johnny is a low-level learner does not mean he can't learn. You just need a scaffold to get him to build up. So be respectful of that and give him challenges that are appropriate for him. Number 4, shared responsibility for learning. So we're not the only ones responsible for their learning. The students need to be responsible for their learning. And one way that you can promote that is to make, say, a rubric that has, explanations of what it means to be a level 4 or 3 or 2 or so on, just like we have a descriptive rubric for each area of our evaluation. It describes exactly what it means to be level 1, 2, 3, or 4. And students like that. It gives them a checklist of, I'm aiming to get this, but this is where I'm at, so I need to go here. They can see it, it's visual. And then when they finish and you conference with them about that to give them their feedback, then you have already got the descriptions there. Here's where you are, and let's talk about what that means, and here's where you want to go. So this helps them to self-assess and to be more involved in their own learning. Some other key features to consider when thinking about differentiated instruction is not just all about the student and their readiness, interest, and learning preferences, but think about the structure. Are you using choice boards or learning centers or stations, learning contracts, RAS, tiering, so many different types of structures for the learning environment, depending on what it is you're teaching at the time. And there's a lot of different strategies that you can use that, one strategy may work well for one group one time and not the rest. And then next time you're using a different strategy, it works great for the next group. So vary those strategies. This quote here is actually from EduGAINS, but it's from their Student Success Differentiated Instruction Teacher's Guide for grades 7 and 8. It says there is absolutely no need to teach concept 8 or 9 different ways. At the same time, it's equally unreasonable to expect that all students will learn all concepts through the 2 intelligences that dominate our education system. And they're talking about the verbal linguistic and the logical mathematical. So try to vary that as much as you can. One of the things that I did to prepare for this is I went through the module on TKES for differentiated instruction. To get there, you would log into PowerSchool, go to your Georgia SLDS, your student longitudinal data system. And once you get in there on your dashboard, click on your TKES tab or the TKES tile. And inside there, you can click on the link for the Georgia Learning Hub. And you can watch all kinds of modules from there. And the one that I'm presenting to you right this second from this point on, or for a little bit, is from the TKES differentiated instruction module. The Georgia Department of Education says differentiated instruction involves teachers meeting the individualized teaching and learning needs of each child. That's a really simple explanation, definition, but it sums it up. To summarize what it is you'll find if you decide to go work on that module, the title of it was TKES Performance Standard for Differentiated Instruction. The module was designed to support educators in understanding the standard for differentiation. The teacher challenges and supports each student's learning by providing appropriate content and developing skills which address the individual learning differences. So that's exactly what the description is on the rubric that we're scored on for our evaluation. This module is also part of the Georgia System of Continuous Improvement. So if you go to the GOE website, you can look that up and get a little bit more information and learn about each area of this wheel. Some key words to remember for are planning for quality instruction, delivering quality instruction, monitoring student progress, and refining the instruction. So coherent instruction system, planning, you're talking about making sure that the instructional system within the district, school, classroom, that the teams that are working on that, they're planning what the students need to know and do, and they're determining how their students are going to get there. What are they going to be able to show you that they know and show you that they can do at the end? Delivering the quality instruction means that the system guides the teachers and how they introduce the content, practices used along the way with the students, and it allows the students to use content on their own while providing the students regular standards-based feedback to gain the mastery. Monitoring their progress is using a methodical way to discover what the students are getting and what they're not getting, and what are you going to do about it when they're not getting it. Excuse me. Refining the system, the instructional system, means that the instructional system examines to show, examines how we show improvement for planning the quality instruction, delivering the quality instruction, and monitoring the student progress. So in Performance Standard 4, there are 4 qualities of differentiated instruction. Number 1 is differentiating the content. 2 is differentiating the process. 3 is differentiating the product. And 4 is the learning environment. If you look at the screen on the right, you'll see that differentiating content has 4 areas that you can use, pretty much like a checklist. And the way that I would say to use that as a checklist is this. In the rubric for our evaluations of teachers, you can get as low as level 1, which just means that you are not performing where you're adequately, all the way to level 4, which means that you would be performing on a continual basis. So as you go through these items on the screen, self-evaluate. Are you level 1, level 2, you're performing inconsistently? Level 3, you are performing on a consistent basis. This is pretty much where we want to be. This is what's expected, the level 3. Or level 4, you're going a bit above and beyond, really. You're continuously doing this to the point of showing leadership. This does not necessarily mean you're an administrator. It just means you're showing leadership. You could be in charge of a committee, or maybe you're in charge, you're the team leader, and you're consistently doing, whichever standard to the point of being a teacher leader. The next quality is differentiating the process. There are 6 areas there. Again, use the rubric as, to guide you on that checklist to see how you're doing, self-assess yourself, to reflect on how your teaching is going. This differentiating the process comes down to talking about how you're delivering the instruction. Are you routinely combining different instructional techniques to be able to involve individual or small group, a whole group? Are you monitoring? Are you pacing the instruction correctly? And there's a few others there too. So check that out. The next quality is differentiating the product. The product being, how is the student showing you that they know what you want them to know? Are you doing a worksheet? Are you having a pop quiz? Is it an oral presentation? Maybe they're doing a book report. Maybe they're doing a video presentation. However it is that they are showing it, make sure you're varying that up to extend the engagement to all students, and allow students to sometimes work alone and sometimes work together in groups. And this is going to help boost your student engagement. The last quality here is the learning environment. So for the learning environment, there's 2 qualities that they look at, or 2 parts that they look at. One is that you're creating an environment where the students' differences in the abilities and cultural backgrounds, academic needs, and interests are respected, and they're treated as assets. Doesn't matter if you've got low students and really high students. Are all of them being respected in the areas they are? Are they being pulled in to work together and being allowed to show what they know and share that? Also, the other part of that is know and understand the students as individuals. This is not just Miss Howard's class. This is Johnny, Susie, Jane, etc. And Johnny likes to play basketball. Susie likes to do dance. And these are things that you would know if you are touching base with your students, which can be done. You can do student interest surveys. You can do a survey to see how they learn best, which type of learning style do they have. You can also hold morning meeting, hold just a check-in conference, like a quick couple of minutes each day. Hey, how's it going? What's something new in your life? Just different ways that you can get to know your students and make them feel safe in their learning environment. In this section here, they are talking about effective instructional strategies using this pyramid. I'm going to quote Carol Ann Tomlinson, who stated that in schools where differentiated instruction is implemented consistently and with fidelity, student outcomes are strong across the group. So as you're preparing your instruction assessments, just ask yourself these questions. What is your definition of differentiated instruction? What does differentiated instruction look like in your school, on your grade level team, within the district? Have you noticed whether or not the actions that are happening have enhanced the student performances, whether you're talking about yourself, your team, your school, the district? Are the actions being taken to differentiate the instruction showing enhanced student performance? So one way to think about this is with this pyramid. The pyramid of effective instructional strategies. The bottom layer is the most effective and the top is the least effective. There's a place for each of them within instruction, but just be cautious that those items at the top are not, because they're not as effective. I wouldn't lecture for 60 minutes every day and nothing else, because you've lost everybody by the time 10 minutes has gone by. I'm an adult and I can barely make it 20 minutes of a lecture. So most of us, and especially our students, learn best when they have opportunities to teach others or practice by doing, joining in on discussions and demonstrating what they have learned. And that's the bottom 4 of the pyramid. Mostly, if you're varying your instruction, then you might be all right. So back to Mr. Franklin's class. We talked about how his class was set up with all of this fabulous differentiation. One of the things that he did great was he had flexible grouping. He introduced the concept to the whole class first. He also had his initial groups were based on the reading readiness. And then his later groups were based on the student's self-interest. So this was great because he was able to take this unit and have a variety of ways for students to receive and produce the information. As far as his task went, which I didn't get into those as much when I explained it to you, some of his tasks had students selected a choice, such as how they would compile the final product, or some of them they were working alone or in a collaborative group. On some of the tasks, some of the parts of the project were teacher directed, such as the type of data collection. He instructed them exactly how they would collect their data. For student support, the whole class had brief discussions throughout the 3 weeks to address problems, concerns, and questions that the class had. Each group, depending on their readiness level, received different amounts of teacher support, either daily or biweekly, just depended on, what their needs were. Some suggestions that I might make for Mr. Franklin would be that if the tasks were not so weighty, wasn't such a heavy project, he could randomize his groups. There's those neat spinner things that are out there on the website now, or you could just draw names from a hat, whatever, randomize it some and let it be up to fate who comes into a group. Also with his task, he could include using technology for all levels of students, not just certain levels, which is what he had done in the project. He assigned, I believe it was just the higher level students to work online. And so you could assign portions that needed technology to all groups, where maybe they go look at a Google slide presentation in your classroom, or maybe they create one. And then the other thing for student support, he could also include that descriptive feedback that I was talking about. Have office hours at the teacher desk so that the group can come with questions as they need to throughout the project. Okay, so now moving on to this part here. The next thing that I did, I also did another module through the SLDS. So this one was about using that state longitudinal data in the SLDS platform to differentiate using the data from the state assessments and Lexile. It's right there for us. And I mean, as soon as the scores come in and you've got the student on your roster, you're able to look at all of their information from the first time that they stepped into Camden County as a student, whether that be pre-K or they came last year or halfway through this year. You can see all of that data. And on this module, they define differentiation as tailoring instruction to meet individual student needs by varying either the content, product, process, or learning environment. I'm going to sum up what I experienced from this module as well. They talked about the state assessment data and where it's located on the platform. They used the class data from the class period drop down They showed you where to find the Lexile and create reading groups based off of that in the platform. You're not just printing out a report and then having to sit there and figure out your own groups. They do it for you. Using the milestone assessment data for achievement scores and sorting the subgroups, using the domain level reports for each content area and expanding the domain by grade level and exporting the reports. And then also they talked about the student profile and the different things that you can find there, such as GTID, individual Lexile, individual reports, etc. So we'll talk about the Lexile level first, and they have 5 easy steps for working with the Lexile. The first one is, number 1, go to your SLDS platform and click on the Lexile tile. Number 2, go to the grade level Lexile band, and it's going to populate based on the grade level of the student. So you can see that highlighted where I've got number 2. Number 3, you're going to click on an available grade level Lexile range to generate a report for the students that are proficient in whichever grade level that's associated with. And then if you click the hyperlinked grade level to generate a report for all assigned students at that grade level. For number 4, they said you can generate a report that's going to reflect the grade level and Lexile level that you click on, and then also note that the Lexile level report defaults to alphabetical order for you. For number 5, the Lexile information can be sorted by student name, demographics, or Lexile just by clicking on the little up and down arrows to each category. The next section that we'll talk about is the domain level report. So once again, you log into the SLDS dashboard, you go to the tile that says domain level reports. And for number 2, it's going to show you the performances in each column. You just click the plus sign next to, say, language domain to review the grade level available. If you click the plus sign next to the grade level, it will not reveal any additional data. For number 3, the students are separated into groups based on their performance in each language domain. So if you click the number inside the colored band, and that's what the arrow is pointing to, that number is telling you how many students are in that band. And it's going to populate a group of students for you. So it's grouping your students for you. You're not having to group them yourself. If you go to number 4, once you have your students grouped, if you want to go back and look at individual students, you can just click on the student's name to go to the student profile page. And for number 5, they're just showing you how you can print that report for yourself. You can do it PDF, Excel, however you want to do it. You can just print it out. And this is good because you'll have an offline copy of that report that you pulled, so that when you're planning, you've got it right there. You don't have to keep going back to the computer. The next area that they talked about was the student profile page. And when you log in to the SLDS website, to the dashboard, at the top, you see that little look by number 1. It'll look like that. And you can look students up by their GTID and number if you know it. Most of us don't have that memorized, but if you've got a report where you've already got that, that's easy. Otherwise, you just click on, the year, the grade level content, all that stuff. And then the very last drop down will be selecting the individual student name. In number 2, well, you see the 2, 3, and 4. This is one report that comes up on your screen for that individual student. That top third of it is the demographic. That's number 2, the demographic information. In there, you're going to see whether or not they are a student with disabilities, if they're gifted, ESOL, any kind of demographic information that might be necessary to you would be there. The next section where number 3 is located. I put that star there with an arrow pointing. So what it's trying to show you there is that there's a little star and there's a number, and that is showing you the student's Lexile number. And you can see that in this example, the student has taken assessments 3 years in a row. So you've got some comparative data for 3 years. This student has been growing each time they took the assessment. The unfortunate thing is there's not a live link, so clicking on that won't do you any good. It's not going to drill down for you in that area. You want to drill down on the Lexile, you need to go back to the previous slides. If you look at the section for number 4, it's pointing to the bottom part. This is where it's going to show you any state assessments that student has ever taken in our system. So if that student has been with Camden County Schools since pre-K, and they are now a senior in high school, as my son is, and my son did take a CRCT. They were still doing that before the milestones. So our seniors, if they've been with us since pre-K, they've probably got a GKIDS report, and a CRCT, and some EOGs and EOCT. So all of that data is there for you. You can see how that student has been growing from the time they stepped into Camden County. If they are GAA students, they're going to have those assessments in there. If they're ESOL students, they're going to have those access reports in there, and whatever state assessment that pre-K has, any state assessment. That's the key. If it's a state assessment, it'll be there. Sometimes there are local assessments in there too, such as I have noticed with some of my students in the past that they have had the STAR report, the STAR assessment was in there. And I believe when we were doing the MAP assessment that was in there too. So if it's a local assessment, sometimes it's there, sometimes it just depends on the assessment. But you can drill down to any of these assessment data points to access more in-depth information about that student's performance on those assessments. And as long as they have been with us, then you're going to have it. Now, if the student came, say, this school year, you're probably not going to find very much because they haven't taken a state assessment yet. Unless they came at the beginning of high school year and they've already taken an EOCT for a course in the first semester, you would see that. Another thing is that there are some sections where it won't let you drill down to the student growth percentile. So, but you still get a lot of information there. Section 5, over there, those two images are showing you that you can go to the student profile and get a report for the student schedule if you need it, if it's available. And you can get enrollment history of the student. And for high school students, you can get an unofficial transcript. So to conclude this, I just have a quote again from the EduGAINS website, from that Student Success Grades 7 and 8 instructional guide. This is the main thing. And I apologize already for the one typo. When all is said and done, the purpose of differentiation is to work smarter as teachers so that our students work smarter as students. The point is not to become overwhelmed by the myriad of instructional and assessment strategies, but to be selective and purposeful in our use for them. In this way, we can provide opportunities for our students to take more responsibility for how they learn and, in turn, what they learn. The next slide is just the references to show you where I found all of this information. And if you would like to know more, you can contact me at our school email. It's B, as in Brenda, Howard at camden.therest. I appreciate your time and have a great day.